provides only about 100 mm worth of armor, and just in case there is also a quite prominent cupola on top that you can go through easily with 90 mm of penetration. Really, unless you are engaging lower tiered opponents, you have to hope that the enemies will hit the size of the turret, which are auto ricochet zones, otherwise it's goodbye health. And with that not too promising finish, let's jump into the gameplay and see what this T-34-100 is really about. Alright, so here we are in our T-34-100, this time around in a standard battle on airfield. Now before we start to look at the details of this Czechoslovakian Tier 7 medium tank, let's just have a look at what we got ourselves into, and well, it doesn't really look great, does it? We are one of the very few Tier 7 machines in the match. Most of the enemies we will face will be Tier 8, and there are even 3 Tier 9 enemies that we really have to worry about, so yeah, we definitely have our work cut out for us. Now, that said, the playstyle won't really change for this machine, because this is through and through a support tank, which would play more or less exactly in the same fashion, facing a lot lower tiered opponents as well. But as we get ourselves into a rather laid-back position, waiting to see if the enemies will push on the east this time as well, as they lately seem to do, let's start the comparison. How does the T-34-100 actually go against the other Tier 7 mediums? Basically, we can compare this tank mostly against the T-20, Tier 7 American medium tank, and the T-34-1, the Chinese Tier 7 medium. All three of these tanks are relatively mobile support tanks that have a rather punchy gun but limited DPM. Now what this means is that these guys simply just can't fight their way out of fire. If you can use them well, however, the on average 175 mm of penetration and 250 average damage per shot will stack up quite nicely over time. What I tend to find with my T-20, for example, is I'm able to do quite a bit of damage, even if I'm not able to do it quickly. Comparing the DPM details of this machine, this thing actually has a quite decent rate of fire compared to the other two. We are able to put out, at base, a shot every 8 seconds, while the T-34-1 and the T-20 have to wait about a second longer after each shot before they can pull the trigger. Now this means we have a relatively significant advantage in terms of DPM, which I didn't really appreciate when I first played my constructor, but then again I didn't have the comparison to do so. At the same time though, the gun is certainly not one of the strongest. The 2.3 second aim time is not bad on it, as is the 0.36 meters accuracy, especially if we compare it to the T-34-1, which has 2.8 seconds aim time and 0.4 meters dispersion. However, before we start to feel really good about ourselves, let's just consider that the T-20 has better aim time, the same accuracy, better dispersion, and that tank can use vertical stabilizers, while the T-34-100 can't. So that means we will have to sit there for quite a bit aiming up those shots, and that can be a little bit of a problem if we want to play a more active role. If we are getting lucky with our shots like that, well, that certainly helps. Now something else that's a little bit annoying, or actually quite a bit annoying about the gun, is that we only have 5 degrees of gun depression. Again, the T-20 has double than that, and I have to say this is probably the worst medium in this comparison again compared to the other three, because while the T-34-1 has 5 degrees as well, that thing has a much smaller silhouette, so you are sitting closer to the ground to begin with, and that means that the gun depression is not as punishing. If you try to use this thing on a ridgeline, it can get really tricky really fast. We already discussed that the armor on it is pretty much negligible. What about the mobility? Well, we have a quite good top speed at 54 km per hour. However, our power to weight ratio is the weakest of the three once again, about 15.4 horsepower per ton, which is not great. At least we have quite decent terrain resistances. Still, overall, I would say once again that T-20 takes the prize in that regard as well. So overall, T-34-100. As long as you don't try to do something with it that it's really not good at, and try to stick to a supporting role for most of the match, you actually will have a decent time with it. You just really have to learn the locations which you have to avoid because, well, your gun depression just simply will make it useless. If you can avoid getting too much attention and love from the enemy team, the rate of fire, combined with the punchy nature of the gun, can actually bring you a rather sweet result. And if you are able to do that reliably, about 2000 damage per game should be able to achieve really, similar to what I can get in the T-20 as well. However, once you get in the center of attention, oh boy. Yeah. This thing is definitely not bulletproof. Well, that's sad.